Bitcoin is for everyone, including your worst enemies. And so who am I to say they can and can't do it? I can't. It's not how Bitcoin's set up, right? Bitcoin's set up to be an open, decentralized protocol. If anyone wants to participate, here's the rule set. Come on board. We've had 15 years to front run governments, right? If we were to talk about a global adoption, it's not going to be happening on layer one. So technology scales in layers. You see that with the internet, you see that with any open, decentralized protocol, it scales in layers. Cash is very much on its way out, sadly. But to scale to 8 billion people globally, you're going to need some sort of system that can, make that medium of exchange happen in real time at light speed. Bitcoin does that.
The revolution of Bitcoin, what makes it valuable is it's like the first time in human history you can hold a bearer asset and control it. It can't be taken away, it can't be debased, can't be confiscated, can't be manipulated. Like when you hold it properly, it's like one of the first steps to become a self-sovereign individual. G'day, ladies and gentlemen. I've brought Chris back on. He's an Australian entrepreneur, the founder of Bitcoin Alive, which is a massive Bitcoin conference that's held each year at the Roundhouse here in Sydney. Chris, we've got a lot to cover today, but first off, how are you? And what an interesting start to 2025 it's been so far for the Bitcoin space, eh?
Hey, Sean. How you doing, mate? Thanks for having me back on. It's always good to have a yarn with you. It's always a bag of fun. Look, it's been an electric start to the year for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we'll touch on today. But for me, my head's always down, and I find excitement in every aspect of the cycle that is Bitcoin. So, for me, it's just another day in the office.
Absolutely. One of the things I think you're a little bit famous or maybe infamous for is not checking the Bitcoin price, like ever. You just don't look at it. Yes, when we hit milestones and stuff, you can get the sentiment vibe from X, what's going on, which happened, sort of towards the end of last year. And we've talked about this previously, but why are you still, like all these years later, like year over year, not looking at the Bitcoin price? And I guess, is it not to get caught up in it and like keep your eye on the prize of staying humble, stacking sats? Or what's the thesis behind that?
I think it's kind of evolved over time. So for those who don't know, and to be honest, I don't think I'm famous at all, let alone for this, but I might be crazy for doing this.
I think we're all crazy if we're here.
It started at the beginning of 2023, actually. I basically sent out a tweet saying, does anyone want to see if they can not check the price of Bitcoin in dollar terms, that is, for the whole year? And again, to my point of not being famous, no one took up that offer. No one even engaged with that tweet. And so I said, all right, well, I'm still going to do it myself. I don't really mind. I was just, always find more enjoyment in life when I get to do things with others. But if it's just me, then so be it. I'll be the guinea pig. And so basically I started doing it and I started documenting it, realized that documenting it each month gave people an opportunity to just tell me what the price was. And initially people thought I was joking. Yeah. Colleagues and people I work with, they don't think you're serious initially, and fair enough. Like, it is a pretty stupid thing to do, especially when you've got pretty much your entire net wealth in this thing. Seems a bit, irrational to not check the value of that in dollar terms. But again, I set myself the challenge. So I continued with it, and I got to the end of 2023 and I thought, okay, it's been 12 months. I haven't checked the price of Bitcoin. My behavior hasn't changed. I'm still stacking sats. I'm doing my dollar cost average on a daily basis. And, I'm noticing over time that my purchasing power is increasing. Happy days. All of my assumptions are true. So I figured I'll just keep going. And so I did it for the entirety of 2024 as well. And sorry, I got my dates wrong. It's 2022. 2022 is when I thought
it was a little bit longer.
Sorry, yeah. So now we're at 3 years now at the start of 2025. It was on January 1st, 2022. I did it for the second year in 2024, and then just sort of continued doing it up until now. The only time that I recently figured out what the price was when we hit that big milestone of 100K. Obviously, that was unavoidable. I'm still checking Twitter and I'm still socially active, although not super aggressively for other reasons, but it's difficult. I've learned to mute words, and I've learned to scroll quickly past anything that looks like a price chart or any sort of price discussion. You get good at just kind of filtering that out. You only see what you want to see, and I don't want to see that stuff. People have also started to like take me seriously about it. So like I'll jump into work calls or team meetings, and everyone will be talking about the price, and they'll see me join. I'll be, oh, we'll pick up this conversation later. Chris has just joined. So they're actually starting to be like, respectful of my choices, which is hilarious. And I thank them for that. But ultimately, everyone's free to do whatever the hell they want. But I think now what it's evolved to is very much like, to me, it's just noise. Like, I think it's irrelevant. I've got that much conviction over the last almost 15 years of being in this industry that, it doesn't really matter what the price does today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I have a very low time preference, and I'm thinking decades ahead. What am I going to do with my Bitcoin beyond my lifespan? That's kind of where I'm at now, because it's going to outlive me. And I know at some point I'm going to die. So I'm going to need to figure out what that plan is. So instead of focusing on, is it going to drop 10% tonight? Is it going to drop 20% tomorrow? I've got my game plan. I've got my strategy. I'm buying every day. So I'll be buying the tops. I'll be buying the bottoms. I'll be buying the sideways. I'll be buying it all. It doesn't really matter, because I'm worrying about what the price does or what the purchasing value looks like in 100 years from now. So if you're familiar with Jeff Booth, who's a famous Bitcoiner, unlike myself, he talks a lot about this. Especially, he's probably the only other Bitcoiner that I've come across publicly that talks about living in the Bitcoin standard and living in the world that you want to see, effectively being priced on a Bitcoin standard. You read his stuff and you think he's like, his book's called The Price of Tomorrow. He's literally living in the future. It's a great book, and you should definitely read it if you haven't read it. But that's kind of the tack that I'm trying to take as well. Is like, all right, I want to live my life based on a Bitcoin standard, not based on a fiat standard. So I want to rewire my brain to think like that. And so part of that is not looking at the price. I think the price keeps you grounded in the traditional system, and I don't want to be part of that. I want to see that system move on, and I want to see a system where Bitcoin becomes the standard. So I'm being the experimental guinea pig, in the sense that I'm doing it hopefully what is earlier than the rest of the world, because if this thing goes the way we think it's going to go, then Bitcoin will become the standard, and everyone will think, oh, how did that guy know back in 2022 that this is the way it was going to end up? Like, I don't know, maybe I got lucky, or I'm not sure, but that's kind of the reasoning behind why I don't check the price.
If you've still got your Bitcoin on an exchange, or you're looking to take your Bitcoin security to the next level, I've partnered with the Bitcoin Way. They offer live help for setting up cold storage, running your own node, keeping your Bitcoin private, planning for the future, using multi-sig, and so much more. They never touch your keys. They will not touch your coins. Instead, they'll show you how to buy and keep them safe. If you want to make your Bitcoin setup safer, you can book a free 30-minute call and have a chat with them. Safe Dina Moose, the author of the Bitcoin Standard, Natalie Brunel, Preston Pish, and so many more recommend the professional IT cybersecurity team. Couple of outstanding things here. You can see they've been featured in Forbes, Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin Prague, Zero Hedge, Simply Bitcoin, the Bitcoin Safe Dean, the Bitcoin Standard podcast with Safe Dina Moose, Bitcoin News, obviously G'day Bitcoin for a long time. They're the world experts in helping people become self-sovereign. It's not just about protecting your Bitcoin stash. Yes, they will help you do that in a very easy to understand step-by-step process. But from there, they can help you secure your data. They are your personal cybersecurity IT experts. And then step number 3 is getting a second passport, a Plan B residency. The team, very cheap, very affordable for people that are looking to take their sovereignty to the next level. You can find out more about their services. When you first log in to their website as well, they have got a free 3-minute quiz to allow you to check if you are doing your cybersecurity, your setup correctly. I urge everyone to jump onto the bitcoinway.com. I have put a link into the description for everyone. Could not recommend them enough. I've used them personally before I ever partnered with them for the channel, friends and family. They asked me to help them out. I'm like, go to the world experts. That is the Bitcoin Way. So reach out to the Bitcoin Way today. One of the things that, like, I got a question about, you said you're DCAing daily. What exchanges, this may only be applicable to Australian listeners, but where are you DCAing daily into Bitcoin?
Yeah, you're right. It is an Aussie-based exchange. So I use Bitaroo on a daily
Yep.
basis. I've got my auto set and forget. It's great. They send me a reminder every day when the trade's executed. There's no details in that, so I don't even have to know, like, hey, you bought this much at this price. It's all set up, automated. I don't even log in. I log in maybe once a month just to withdraw my funds and to top up the fiat balance, and then away I go. So yeah, that's who I use. But I would recommend checking out all the other Aussie-based Bitcoin exchanges as well. There's a couple of great operators in this country.
Yeah, completely agree. So then to be able to follow on, like especially last year, I had quite a lot of trouble with the banks locking my account, stopping me from like totally accessing my account, being locked out for like 48 hours over and over and over again. A couple of other places, 72 hours, one of the banks, 28 days. So like I've struggled moving fiat into Bitcoin, but you're talking about like living on a Bitcoin standard. I know you are, or at least you were, associated with BitPay, which allows you to sort of go from Bitcoin towards the fiat currency. Like, how are you finding living more like in the future money to be able to go back? Because we still live in a very fiat dominated world, or denominated, both.
Yeah, you're right. I'll just fix up a little error you made there. It was actually Bit Refill, not BitPay.
Bit refill. My
But
apologies. Thank you.
I think you knew who you were talking about. You just misspoke.
Yeah.
I'm no longer with that business, but I was the country manager here in Australia for almost 4 years. So that certainly helps. And for anyone that's not familiar with Bitrefill, they're one of the world's largest, if not the world's largest, kind of e-commerce store that allows you to live on Bitcoin through the means of digital gift cards predominantly. So, for instance, in Australia, there's a couple of hundred different gift card offerings that they have on their website, but they service the globe. But specifically here in Australia, JB Hi-Fi, Bunnings, Coles, Woolies. I mean, you name it. You name any of the large major retail outlets that have gift cards, it's probably listed on Bitrefill. So that's one way that it's possible to live on a Bitcoin standard and still go down to your local grocer or your local hardware store who don't natively accept Bitcoin yet, and spend your Bitcoin. You do it through the means of Bitrefill or a service like that, which is a trade-off. Some people would think, oh, that's pretty inconvenient, but to your point, getting debanked or being told what you can and can't do with your money, to me, is a bigger inconvenience. So being able to store all of my wealth in Bitcoin gives me that freedom, knowing that I won't be debanked because I am my own bank, so to speak. I hold the access to all of my wealth. I don't rely on intermediaries or third parties to dictate that behavior, and nor do they get to peer into what my spending habits look like. That's also none of their business. But if you live in the fiat world, that's all tracked and traced and probably sold to the highest bidder. So yeah, there's definitely ways to go about it, but like anything, there are trade-offs, and so you need to determine what are the trade-offs that you're willing to make and what are the ones that you're not willing to sacrifice on. And for me, being debanked or again living in that fiat world, I don't want to live in it. I want to live in the future world, which is a Bitcoin standard. So I can talk about it and I can blog about it and I can tweet about it, but living it is actually doing something substantial. Even if I'm one of the only people doing it and people look at me, heck, you're freaking crazy. Hopefully in the future, I'm not going to seem so crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. And like what you're saying in regards to grocers, they're not accepting Bitcoin yet. I really feel like this move comes from the Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin community to enroll. Like I just had Rory, Rory from the conferences, had him here looking after the dogs. And I'd been slowly orange pilling our local cafe down the road, real young, beautiful couple running it. And Rory just had the time and the capacity. And so they're now taking Bitcoin Lightning, which is really good. I manage with the whole food shop. And when I picked Rory up, he's like, does anyone here accept Bitcoin, any of the shops? I'm like, yeah, the whole food store does. So it's like, let's go there straight away. So I just picked him up. We went straight there simply because they accepted Bitcoin. He wanted to spend Bitcoin with them. And the person that I set Lightning up on their phone, they weren't there, so we had to set up his wife, and then we set up their daughters as well. So like the whole shop's now accepting Bitcoin, and the staff are trained in how to do that. But before we went live, it sort of brought up the conversation around Lightning. So when I sat down with Rory, I very clearly said, Lightning or Bitcoin on Lightning is not real Bitcoin. And that's what I believe. I know, like, factually that's incorrect. I understand it's the same asset, but like, just for people watching or listening, my context for me and my own beliefs, and maybe it's a little bit too maxi or a little bit too like on the straight and narrow, but unless you're holding the keys to your Bitcoin, I don't believe it's your Bitcoin. If you buy Bitcoin and it's on the exchange, it's not your Bitcoin. If you buy Bitcoin through an ETF, even if there's in-kind redemptions, I don't think it's your Bitcoin. Like, that's just the way I see it. But I understand Bitcoin, or like Bitcoin Core, like the main chain, as a medium of exchange. It is a little bit slow. The fees are a little bit higher. So we have this scaling solution, Lightning, that works fast. It's very, very cheap. It's incredible. I absolutely love it. I think it's amazing. I think it's a good workaround with it. And you can set up your own Lightning node, and you can fund that channel. And I think if you do that, and then you've got the keys for the Bitcoin on Core, I think that's real Bitcoin. But the issue I have, or what I was getting at, is I don't think the majority of people, whether we're using Aqua Wallet or Wallet of Satoshi or any of the amazing Lightning wallets out there, they're like a custodial service. Somebody else is holding the keys on our behalf, and it's very centralized. So to be able to take this back to like the cafes accepted and stuff, what do you think like happens with Lightning, Liquid, or the scaling of Bitcoin? Because at the moment, the narrative around store of value, and Bitcoin's been incredible over time as that. But the medium exchange, it's on Core or on the main chain, it's a little bit slow. It's maybe a little bit more expensive. So like, how do you see the transition into actually using Bitcoin to be able to buy your coffee, to be able to go out and buy chocolate, or pay for the movies, or do whatever? And it doesn't need to happen overnight, but say the next 5 years time frame.
Yeah, I mean, they're all great points. Look, I would say, where are we at with the traditional financial system, and how has it come to scale to be a global system, right? We've made those same trade-offs in centralizations and IOUs. You tap your bank card at a Visa or a MasterCard machine at the grocer. Is that dollars? Like, it's not, right? Like, it's a bank infrastructure saying beep, and like some numbers in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere in the background change hands. But at no point in time does real money. Real money is more or less lost unless I give you physical cash, a bearer asset, to your hand, which again doesn't scale well. And we've seen, at least in this country, and I know in other parts of the Western world for sure, cash is very much on its way out, sadly. But to scale to 8 billion people globally, you're going to need some sort of system that can, make that medium of exchange happen in real time at light speed. Bitcoin does that better than anything else, right? Even on the main chain layer, it does that better than anyone else. And I would argue that fees are sometimes expensive, sometimes not, right? It depends on the network congestion. But the reality of it is very much so that if we were to talk about a global adoption, it's not going to be happening on layer one. That's just fact, right? It just doesn't have the throughput to allow for that. So technology scales in layers. You see that with the internet. You see that with any open, decentralized protocol. It scales in layers. So we're going to need this layered approach. Whether Lightning or Liquid or something that hasn't been even invented yet is that scaling process, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to be able to peer into the future and say, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to be successful. But maybe an unpopular opinion, but like, will there be trade-offs in centralization to allow for that to occur? Possibly. I mean, we're kind of seeing it even with like Bitcoiners and their behavior. The reality of it is most people are not opening their own channels and running their own Lightning nodes and controlling their own keys. They're using Wallet of Satoshi. They're using Aqua. They're using all of these like rightfully great products, but there are trade-offs, right? So whether that's going to continue or if that's going to change, call me pessimistic, but I think it's probably going to continue. Again, like if you put 100 Bitcoiners in a room, and I'm talking Bitcoiners, you, me, like proper Bitcoiners that store their wealth in Bitcoin and hold their own keys, how many of us are using Lightning nodes and running our own channels? And, it's a very small percentage. Be it sad or not, it's the reality of it. And that could be the immaturity of the software. That could be the technical capabilities required to be able to do that. Maybe that'll get easier over time. I hope so. I certainly hope so. But I'm fearful of saying that, everyone's going to run their own node. Everyone's going to have their own keys. Like we've seen it over 15 years. I've spent the last nearly a decade educating and helping people get their Bitcoins off exchange and into their own control. And I don't think I've scratched the surface with making it we're talking about tens of thousands of Australians that I've single-handedly helped use hardware wallets. And how many more are actually using exchanges and leaving their coins on there? Like significantly, like maybe 2% of people hold their own keys. And we're talking about one of the most important aspects of this asset is being able to hold it yourself. And the reality is people still aren't doing it. Like it's a sad reality, and I want to help change that, and I'm doing my best, but we have to also be a realist about it. And are 8 billion people around the world going to be doing that if we're talking about Lightning making an impact on medium of exchange on an everyday basis? To be determined. Of course I would hope so, but I have my fears that it will eventuate like that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, Chris. Like all I want, or like the revolution of Bitcoin, what makes it valuable is it's like the first time in human history you can hold a bearer asset and control it. It can't be taken away. It can't be debased. Can't be confiscated. Can't be manipulated. That like when you hold it properly, it's like one of the first steps to become a self-sovereign individual. And all I want is for people to be able to understand like the freedom, but also like at the start, especially, like it's pretty scary taking 100% self-responsibility. If you stuff up, it's gone, like game over, no repeat, no back button, no CEO, anything like that. But when you do take that leap and you do it, it's so empowering. Like I want everyone to be able to experience like the empowerment for themselves, but then also the freedom over time that it allows for. I understand most people won't. It's fuck it. Yeah, I don't know. Most people won't, but I guess like it's only a few people that. Like that saying, John D. Rockefeller, he who controls the money controls the world. Well, with Bitcoin, we can take it into self-custody and then control the money. So we can control our money, we control our own world. We can make the world a better place. Like that's, the people that take action on that, that's who inspires me. And I just think they're making the world a better place for that. So keeping this thread going, Trump has announced, what many people, including myself, have labeled like the strategic shitcoin stockpile. They're talking last year, and yes, like it's only been like less than a week or whatever. Like, chill, it's all good. He's a politician. Like, we're allowed to put shit on him just because he's a politician, left or right. That's what politicians are for. Like, everyone fucking relax.
It's almost expected.
Yeah, but people like, he's only been in for a couple of days and you're putting shit on Trump. I don't care who's in there. Like, they are that person. It's a little bit tongue in cheek. But Lumnus last year introduced the concept of the strategic Bitcoin reserve. RFK and stuff talked about it a lot. Trump talked about it a bit, but then since coming in, the conversation about a strategic Bitcoin reserve hasn't really eventuated in any way really from Trump. Yes, Lumnus is still doing her things, but the language at the moment, at least, and I understand like the SBR needs to go through Congress and it can't be done by executive order. Cool, but there's still no conversation. But what the conversation that we're having now is about the stockpile, and it looks like the CEO of XRP or Ripple, Brad Garlinghouse, is like trying to fund and like dismiss the idea of a SBR and stuff. But like, what are your just thoughts, I guess, around the conversation around like adding cryptocurrency, which most of them are centralized or they're not backed up by proof of work. They have somebody in control. Like for example, Vitalik's saying he's in full control at the minute in regards to Ethereum. Or Solana, it went down multiple times last year. They can inflate the supply or whatever. It's no limited cap. There's no scarcity to them. What are your thoughts around doing that? It seems like they've got such an opportunity to really be world leaders, and they're getting caught up in the noise. That's what I think, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, look, there's so many different angles that you could look at this. Trump made his own meme coin. He's done his own NFTs. So, it's not as if this should come as a massive surprise that he's not a Bitcoin maxi. He's talked about a SBR, and he's certainly done a lot of cheerleading to the Bitcoin community. And those are all great things. But, to what you said to begin with, he's a politician, and, they often break promises and say one thing and do another. Look, to be fair, he's probably done a whole lot more in his first week than what Biden did in his entire term.
Can I just jump in? He freed Ross, man. Sure.
That's exactly what the words out of my mouth
matters.
Yeah, he said he was going to do that day one, and he did that day 1/day 2. So, and I think he over-delivered on that. People weren't thinking he was going to be pardoned, and he was pardoned. So, I don't know. I don't know what you're going to get. It's a politician. They've got their own motivations. I think I like to hope he's assembled a pretty good team around him that can give him the right advice. You're spot on. Bitcoin is one thing, and crypto, all those that you mentioned, and the millions of other coins and tokens and nonsense is a completely different thing. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time to be able to look at them objectively and come to that realization that, hey, do we really want a strategic stockpile to contain something called Ripple, which can be manipulated by some guy and some board, or Ethereum, which can be manipulated by a foundation, which continues to dump on their holders? Common sense would say, no, that's not a good way to, it's just the same reason why you don't have some, crap metal that makes up the periodic table that isn't as good as gold in a strategic reserve. No one's just got steel sitting in some crappy little metal that's abundant and can be manipulated, whereas gold is, supposedly more difficult to obtain. So why would they make those decisions? There's no logic behind that. Can they be influenced? Of course. All politicians are influenced. And so if the right amount of money and the right amount of people cheerleading can get the right message across, then maybe they will add Ripple into the strategic reserve. I don't think it's a good idea, but I can't rule it out completely. I think it's a terrible idea. And like I said, if they had half a brain, they would realize that.
Specifically XRP, all shitcoins are shitcoins, but XRP is the number one shitcoin. It's the worst. Ripple advertises that they want to help with CBDCs. Anyone supporting that, fuck you. See ya. I'm not interested. Right? Yeah, thanks.
He's come out and banned it. So it goes. They're at odds with each other. Right?
Yeah,
I can't see it happening. I've had this one theory that maybe I've seen people talking about it online, and they apparently they hold a number of different coins just already from confiscation or whatever other means that they've obtained these coins. I don't think they're actively out there buying them, but they've got a reserve of Bitcoin, of Ethereum, of a few other different coins. I can't remember the exact ones. So maybe they've just given that language to accommodate for the fact that they already hold all of these things. That doesn't mean that they're going to add to them. It just means that they hold them and that the law allows for them to hold them. They may realize that the only thing worth holding is Bitcoin, and so they will double down on it over time. But that's just a speculation. I don't know for sure if that's the reasoning as to why they've done it. Look, even Brad doesn't want to buy XRP. He just constantly dumps it. What does that tell you? It's not worth holding. It's not worth acquiring. Even the CEO of the damn company doesn't want to buy it. The common denominator here is Bitcoin. Everyone's holding Bitcoin. That is the strategic reserve. It's, I don't hold Ripple. You don't hold Ripple. The world's not holding Ripple. But even the people who hold Ripple and all these other shit coins often have Bitcoin. So that is the the common denominator across this entire thing. And if you're looking for a strategic reserve, that is the thing that you want strategically to hold. So I would like to think logic and common sense prevails in this regard. But again, don't put it past anyone, even Trump, considering some of the good things he's already done in a week's time. Yeah. He may still make shitty decisions.
It'll be interesting. I think, like in hindsight, we'll be able to go back and follow the money. But like they've got an opportunity. We'll see what happens. And yes, a little bit tongue in cheek. I understand it's been a week. Relax. But if you're holding XRP, have a long, hard conversation with yourself, please. And you are supporting CBDCs. It's crazy. So, like in saying that, maybe he fumbles, maybe it takes a little bit longer. Maybe that gives Australia a chance to be able to push forward with the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Like, Chris, we've got so much energy here. Like, we've got, I think, the biggest uranium deposits in the world, like the red tape around nuclear and stuff. I understand that's, really hard to be able to get through, but the whole country's a desert. Like, there's a green strip sort of from like the beach and 100 kilometers in. And then the rest of the island, which is freaking massive, is just desert. Like, we just get sun. There's some places that probably never rains, in 10 years. Wind turbines, I think they're pretty shit, but we get enough wind as well with the trade winds and stuff, especially in Cairns, like during winter and things like that. So, like, when it comes to and then like our coal and natural gas, we've got enough to be able to run the country for the next couple of 100 years, like with all this energy. Bitcoin requires a hell of a lot of use for energy. I was having this conversation, I won't drop their name, them very, very well, yesterday with a mastermind. We sort of started the conversation off around this. If Australia was like to loosen the regulations and allow miners to this abundant energy and to incentivize them to come here. Like, I understand we've got, I think, the sixth highest energy costs in the world, or like, which we don't need to, but we've got like endless energy and just politics is getting in the way of making it cheap. But say they incentivize Bitcoin miners to come here and then the government takes like a Bitcoin tax or whatever, 10% of Bitcoin mine, whatever it is, that there's a way for us, because of the amount of energy, to really like jump ahead of like the US or other countries. Maybe the US beats us to it because at least they're already having that conversation. Do you think, I don't know how deep you want to go into it. I know like the conference is coming up and there's probably going to be some conversations in regards to a strategic Bitcoin reserve in Australia. But like, do you have any like preliminary thoughts about like, is it possible? Is it realistic? Are any conversations already happening or?
Yeah, I mean, all of that is great. There's so many different things to touch on there. You're right. We are one of the most energy abundant countries in the world, and we should be a leader and a powerhouse in this regard. And it's a real shame that we're not. Energy equals abundance and prosperity. The use of more energy always leads to better quality of life for humans. It's how we got here today on this video call, is we used energy to get here. So, the idea or the notion that energy use is bad is just, it's laughable. Like, without energy, we go back to the dark ages. I don't think anyone wants to live in the dark ages. Everyone wants to have their iPad and everyone wants to be connected and do Zoom calls and do all these things. None of that happens without energy expenditure. So we need to just change the narrative around energy is bad. Energy is good. Energy is very good. Energy is how you solve problems and deal with things. So we should be very much at the forefront of the energy movement in this country. And I hope at some point our leadership wakes up to this. Right now, I'm not very optimistic in that. Seems to be a lot of bickering and still plenty of ESG nonsense and all of that crap. I hope maybe we can take some initiative based on the early movements of what Trump looks to be doing. He seems to understand this concept of energy being good. So maybe, we've sort of turned the corner in terms of how far retarded we want to go to one direction. We might be starting to come back the other direction, which is promising.
Go retarded in that way.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how it goes, right? It's sort of flip-flopping over decades between the left and the right and somewhere in the middle. And, that's just how it seems to go. And right now we've just veered far, far too left especially in this country, that it's just absolute nonsense, some of the things that we spend our time thinking about and trying to deal with. There are much more important and better problems to be trying to attack. One of those very much being energy use. But yeah, in terms of like enticing miners to this country, I mean, the reality of it is we're far off that. It's not even happening at a national level, and those types of discussions. We're still having to battle the FUD of, oh, Bitcoin uses so much energy, it's like the energy consumption of Switzerland, and it's bad for the environment. And we're still in the very, very infant stages of having an adult conversation about what Bitcoin mining is and why it's important and why countries should be really embracing it. So I'm very pessimistic about that. But in saying that, to your point about some of the things that have been happening, whilst it's not a major political party, there are some smaller political parties, one in particular, the Libertarian Party, who are actively pursuing Bitcoin. And I know they've been working on a draft Bitcoin policy. What that entails exactly, I've only seen very small amounts of and only draft versions. So I can't tell you what the full published policy is going to look like. But maybe if you come along to Bitcoin Alive, you might find out. Maybe, perhaps. Little spoiler there. But yeah, it's got to start somewhere. It's just like anything. Recently AMP was the first managed super fund in this country to make an investment into Bitcoin on behalf of their members. It's only 27 million, not a huge amount of money comparatively to what's under management, but it's a signal, right? It's like, hey, we're doing this, we've done it, we're the first, we've stuck our neck out on the line, and let's see what happens next, right? And just like everyone's going to look back at El Salvador for what they've done, moving to a Bitcoin standard, making a legal tender, buying it Bitcoin every single day, mining Bitcoin with volcano energy, everyone's like, these guys are crazy. But I think in time they're going to be vindicated, and there's going to be history books written about what they've done there and how they've revolutionized that country from a no one country to now one of the potential global powerhouses looking into the future. I hope we can eventually wake up to that. I think we're very relaxed in thinking that Australia is nice and safe and we're all good and, everything's fine and hunky-dory. But the reality is, all the things that are happening in all these other countries where the dollar is collapsing is happening here as well. It's just we're further behind that. Venezuela's completely collapsed. Australia is buckling at the knees, and we're still trying to hold our balance while we're falling over. At some point, we're going to completely faceplant onto the ground, and then we're going to wonder, how did it all go wrong? Well, I could tell you right now how it's all going wrong. We're not focusing on the right things, and part of that, like you said, is very much our energy usage. So yeah, like there's a lot there. I hope that at least the conversation can get into those circles. What the Libertarian Party is doing seems to be promising. Again, they're not coming from a huge position of power. They're one of the minor parties, but we know for a fact that the minor parties do have some sway in the way that the Australian political system is built. Just have a look at the Greens. They never get themselves into any serious sense of power. It's always two-party preferred, but they very much have a lot of influence into the Labor side of things. So, we can only hope that maybe the Libertarian Party will pick up a few seats. They'll be able to get this conversation brought into Parliament. People will start taking it a little seriously. Other global discussions like what's happening in America might force our hand. I mean, the reality of it is, I've always said, Bitcoin is going to be adopted by everyone. It's either by choice, which is the desired result, or by necessity, because you've fallen behind and everyone else has done it, and now you've got to try catch up. That's the undesired way. But at the end of the day, it's the same result. You adopt Bitcoin. I would love to be proactive here in this country and say, hey, let's jump on this. Let's do what El Salvador's done. Let's do what America's potentially looking to do. Let's actually jump on the front foot because, we're starting to see, and I've talked about it for years as well, the global national game theory is evolving right in front of us. If America's making these signals about strategic Bitcoin reserve, all of these sort of things, that's going to be a massive shift globally. Everyone's going to look at it. I mean, it wasn't there news just over the last 24 hours about, I think it was the Czech Republic, were looking to do a strategic Bitcoin reserve or something. I didn't look at exactly, but I saw the headlines. It's you're seeing it now. When would you ever have thought countries would just be saying stuff like this? Even 2 years ago, you'd be laughed at for suggesting such an idea. Whereas now, because America's made their signal, other countries are going, well, shit, if they're doing it, we don't want to be last. It's the classic saying, no one wants to be first, but I can sure bet you no one wants to be last. That's a far worse position to be in than being first, especially on something like Bitcoin, which is effectively unstoppable.
Yeah. I agree. And it was the Czech Republic. Like, I want to dive into the conference because it's been some of the best days of my life. Being at your conference, Chris, it's absolutely incredible. But with their SBR, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, for me, like, I'm just trying to work out like how I feel about it. Do I want the government to be holding Bitcoin? Like, ultimately, the answer for myself is personally, no, I don't. I want everyone to hold Bitcoin in self-custody, run their own node, have an air-gapped hardware wallet, et cetera, to be self-sovereign. But I guess the reason internally I'm divided is, say the Australian government does make Bitcoin strategic Bitcoin reserve and they make Bitcoin legal tender. Because of the misinformation, disinformation, the gaslighting, and the distraction that we've seen from the mainstream media for year after year here in Australia, and how hard the banks make it to buy Bitcoin or for people to even pay any attention, I think that would help people like really just wake up and be like, oh, this is legit. Like, this is real. Like, because here in Australia, for whatever reason, like, everyone trusts every area of the government, and there's some like government sectors or people within government, like, they're just people. I understand they're great. But like, overall as a system, I think it's gotten too big. But so many people put all their faith in the government. The government's here to save us. They're going to look after us. Social security, not that we call it that, but like retirement, pension plans, et cetera, the handouts, like, the government's just going to look after us and they're doing great, blah, blah, blah. They're not really. But another conversation. I think if the government, said Bitcoin, we hold a strategic Bitcoin reserve, it's legal tender, people will be like, oh, maybe I need to buy some. And then they're going to start that education. That's really like the only benefit I see, like, for the common everyday person in Australia. Maybe it might keep them in check with money printing, but like, we already hold gold. We hold a sound asset to an extent. Like, before, Bitcoin is the best form of money, but we weren't pegged to it. So they can just inflate the money supply away anyway. It hasn't kept their spending or anything in check. So I don't think it'd benefit citizens by that means. Or maybe they just come along and they go hardcore psycho Bitcoin maxi, and they're like, Bitcoin strategic reserve, where we're going to peg 1-to-1 with Bitcoin or whatever from the state. We can't print any more money unless we provide more value. I just don't see that happening. But I guess the question is, do you think it's a good idea for countries, nation states to be having strategic Bitcoin reserves, or it doesn't actually matter whether it's good or bad? It's just happening now.
I think that's the position to take, right? Like, irrespective, we like it or not, it's probably going to happen. Bitcoin is for everyone, including your worst enemies. And so, who am I to say they can and can't do it? I can't. It's not how Bitcoin's set up, right? Bitcoin's set up to be an open, decentralized protocol. If anyone wants to participate, here's the rule set. Come on board. We've had 15 years to front run governments, right? So anyone that's been paying attention, which is not the majority, pretty much anyone opposite of what you were describing earlier, the people who don't look for the government to give them the safety rails and to tell them what they can and can't do, they've had their opportunity, and they still do, to some extent, have an opportunity to front run these governments before they say, okay, it's legal tender, we're holding a reserve. And before you know it, Bitcoin's at a figure that most people can't even write down on a piece of paper. I think, we're getting into some deep sort of conspiratorial sort of stuff here, which is a lot of fun. But I think modern Australia kind of has a very heavy reliance on the government. I think part of that comes down to the fact that we've never really had it too hard. Like, it's just been really easy, and I'm a beneficiary of that too. So I certainly don't take it for granted. But we don't know what hard times look like. And, the classic saying of hard times create strong men, good times create weak men. Like here we are, where Australia is very much in these good times, and we're just run by a bunch of weak men. And until we see those hard times, which is what I think is coming with the imploding dollar and house prices and inflation and all the stuff that everyone's feeling, but no one's questioning why, except perhaps the Bitcoiners. That will hopefully change the tune. And I'm not wishing upon anyone harm or anyone to have a bad time. Whether I do or don't, it's not going to change the fact whether it happens or it doesn't. I think
That's right.
It's probably happening regardless of what I have to say. I'm a nobody. But I think Australia is very complacent in the fact that we rely heavily on our government, for good or for worse. Like I said, it's an amazing country to live in. It really
incredible.
It's a beautiful country. There's so many great things going on about it. As pessimistic as I am about a lot of things in this country, I'm very, very thankful that I was born here. It could have, the lucky dip could have been far worse for me, and it has for others. And I'm not sort of forgotten about that. But that's not to say that we can't make it better and we can't handle ourselves better. I think hopefully that is coming with better leadership, perhaps a different generational being the leaders, perhaps not the boomers, and maybe someone from my generation or a different generation, maybe not one of the recent ones. They're also fucked up in their own way too. I mean, we all are, but I kind of hope
social media.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a whole host of things, and a lot of it's perhaps not their fault. Like they've been born into it, and here we are. We've got to deal with what we've got, right? This is the hand we've been dealt. I just think that we could definitely be doing a better job. That's for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So before we flip into the conference, I just want to ask: have you read? Or I know it's not out, but Lawrence Lepard's book, The Big Print, by any chance?
I have not read it. No.
I think it comes out probably a week after this podcast drops. I was so lucky, so blessed. He sent me like the final manuscript. I know I sent it to a couple of people. It was like I love read the books or eat the bugs. But just for everyone watching, like everything that Chris is talking about things potentially getting much, much harder with the currency collapse and stuff. Lawrence Lepard, he's got a gold and Bitcoin hedge fund. He's been around Wall Street, trading $500 million a day at different points in his life, truly understands the financial system, lays it out in such a clear way. I urge everyone, I plead with everyone to read it. And Bitcoiners are absolutely going to love it. But I think a non-Bitcoiner, if they read it, 95% of people that read it from cover to cover will buy Bitcoin because of how clearly he does it. I think it's probably the best book. It's a big book, but it just lays out everything exactly. And I also believe that fiat's fucked. It's dying. There's no way to say it. Like we've lost so much value against the United States dollar over the last 4 years, and it's just going to continue to happen. We're going to keep losing purchasing power. So Bitcoin's that answer. The Big Print. It's a fantastic book, but just read the books, please. Sorry, Chris, to cut you off.
I was just going to say I would definitely defer to someone like Lawrence on this particular topic. He would probably articulate this much better than what I do. These are the kind of people that I'm reading and listening to form my own opinions and to do my own research on. So, definitely. I haven't read it, but I will read it when it is available. There's a number of great books out there written by some fantastic minds. Lynn Alden has a book called Broken Money, which is a fantastic book. It's a solid read, but it's a fantastic book. And I agree. If anyone that does any significant amount of research into Bitcoin buys it. Like I haven't met anyone that's understood Bitcoin to the level that's required that goes, nah, I'm not feeling that. Like if you do it, if you do the work, you will understand it and you will hold your wealth in it. Like it's just, there's no other way about it. If you don't come to that decision, you haven't done enough work.
That's right. You just fundamentally have not understood what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Completely agree. So like you're holding absolutely incredible conference. You're the entrepreneur behind it. Bitcoin Alive. It's March 8th this year, Sydney Roundhouse. Just absolutely beautiful. I'm not very familiar with Sydney. Like I've only really gone there to go to the conferences or try avoid the capital cities. But like last time I was staying there, Rory and I shared a room. Well, not a room. We shared an apartment. We had our own separate rooms. Let's be clear. But we're like really close to the northern beaches. Bronte Beach, maybe, or one of the other ones that starts with B. And it's just like a real short Uber trip to the Roundhouse and stuff. Really, really epic. I know Checkmate, I just had him on yesterday for a podcast, which will already be dropped. So check that out. But he's a speaker there. I guess, like, what are some of the areas it sounds like you're leading up to, and you're not saying it, but the Libertarian Party may or may not be there with some policy documents. And James Check is just always pure signal, Michael Dunworth, Pete Dunworth, I'm sure they're there. But I guess, like, what's the focus this year? What are some of the speakers, the conversation? Like, sell it to us, man. I'm already sold. It's an incredible event with incredible people. I think if you haven't been to a conference, you live in Australia, it's like Bitcoin Alive was my first Bitcoin meetup conference, anything. And I was like, oh, fuck, I should have done this so much sooner. I felt normal for once, man. Like, talking to normies, I've had normies say, oh, sure, when I first met you, I thought you were so weird. I'm like, fuck it. Like, I'm weird. That's cool. And I want to talk to weird people. And, that's the Bitcoin conference. It's the best. But yeah, I guess, you're the person behind us. Like, what should we know? What should we expect? What should we look forward to, get excited about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for all those kind words. I'm glad you enjoyed yourself. And
dude,
it's
sick.
an honor to be able to put on an event that people have that feeling about it. I would like to just say as well, there's a whole team behind us as well. Not a big team, but it's not just me. There is a team that helped put this together. And without them, this thing doesn't come together. And also the support of the general Bitcoin community. Those people who have supported us, they know who they are. And yourself is one of those, Sean. We don't take that for granted. This is no easy feat, putting on a conference. There's a reason why there'd never been one until we decided to do it, because it's kind of suicide to do something like this. It's not financially viable. It's a hell of a lot of effort and a hell of a lot of work and so much risk. So, we can't do it without all the support that we get from everyone. It means a lot. There are times where I'm like, am I insane for trying to do this? Should I continue? And, the greater mission is what keeps me together, and the support from everyone and the kind words is what keeps the lights on for us. So it means a lot to hear all that. But yeah, I mean, you touched on a few things. Kind of, this is the first time we've run the conference in what appears to be a bull market. So, that I think is going to change the general sentiment of everyone and everything around it. We've also seen a lot of things transpire in the last 12 months since our last event. Some of the things that we touched on earlier with Trump's presidential election and some of the things that have happened there, and just the general macro environment of Bitcoin and traditional finance. I think things are aligning in certain places that's going to really change the sentiment of how everyone's feeling. So that should bring a new vibe to the room, I would hope. But one of the things that we've tried to do as well is, our goal for anyone that's been paying attention since we started this thing was we want Bitcoin Alive to be for everyone. Whilst it is a Bitcoin only conference, and almost every Bitcoin maxi in the country probably attends for obvious reasons, we want Bitcoin to grow beyond that. We are the national Bitcoin event. There are fantastic local Bitcoin meetups in pretty much all major capital cities of this country, and I implore you to go to them if you've got one nearby. If you don't, you should start one. They are fantastic ways to meet like-minded people and just expand your knowledge and your conviction on this amazing technology. I've been doing that everywhere I've lived, and here we are now doing it on a national level. But, part of that is as well for us to be, the big flag holder for Bitcoin in this country. We're the big lights. We're the ones that get the national attention for Bitcoin. So it's our responsibility to kind of try to help grow that community, just, beyond the couple of thousand people that are in all the Telegram groups and in the Twitter threads and all of that sort of stuff. So you'll see that with some of the speakers that we've announced. There's, you mentioned the Libertarian Party. We've got a couple of people from the Libertarian Party coming along to announce something special at Bitcoin Alive, which is, again, something that's never been done before. That's going to be history making in its own right. Never before have we had a political party in this country make any sort of noise in a positive light towards Bitcoin. So to see what they have to say is going to be pretty cool. I would love to say that Liberal and Labor were coming to also announce their Bitcoin stance, but we both know that they're some years away from saying anything positive about Bitcoin. But when and if they do eventually change their tune, our doors are welcome to them too. Like, we don't mind who it is. If they've got something to say about Bitcoin in a positive light, then they're part of the community and they're part of the greater good. We just announced, actually, like over the last 24 hours, like a soft announcement to anyone paying attention to our website. We've actually announced a bunch of different speakers, and we'll be drip feeding them on our socials as well. But if you want to just cut to the chase, go straight to the website, have a look at our speaker list. We've got about a dozen or 15 names up there. There'll be more as well. But some of those names that weren't previously known before yesterday, one of them, for instance, is someone who comes to Bitcoin at a different angle that necessarily you wouldn't think about it. Are you familiar with Pete Evans?
Yes. Very, very briefly, but yes.
Yeah, so Pete's probably most famous for his work. I mean, he's a chef. One of the things he's done is a chef, author, and a filmmaker. But he was, correct me if I'm wrong, he was either on MasterChef or My Kitchen Rules, one of those shows, for a very, very long time as one of the judges. And he more or less got cancelled at some point.
I was just going to ask, wasn't the media attacking him? Like recently, I think they were bringing up his COVID dilemma and stuff as well.
Yeah, so that probably tells you what side of history he's going to be on, right? But yeah, he got cancelled, he lost his job, and got called a lunatic and all that sort of stuff just because he was speaking up on things that many Bitcoiners probably would agree with. And we're
sharing common sense.
Yeah, kind of that stuff, not so common, but common sense. So yeah, he comes at Bitcoin. It turns out he's been a Bitcoiner for a number of years and understands it quite well. Perhaps not from like a technical perspective, like, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm super technical, but obviously with 10 plus years of experience in Bitcoin, I've looked at the weeds. But he comes at Bitcoin from a different element, through his lens of his experiences through life, being a chef and an author and a filmmaker and involved with, so-called celebrity kind of world. He's obviously very far tapped out from that now, given what's happened to him. But it's going to be really interesting to hear from him and hear his perspective. And, that's part of the push of Bitcoin Alive, to kind of open the doors up to tangential audiences who aren't necessarily going to these local meetups because they're fearful, they might not fit in, maybe they don't think they know enough, or they don't have any friends, so they have no way of getting into it. We want them people, like, again, Bitcoin is for everyone. So we want everyone to attend Bitcoin Alive and find that angle that works for them, that gets them interested in this beautiful thing that is Bitcoin. So, Pete Evans is a name, for instance, that we've announced recently that is probably a little left of center than what you would expect. But that's, again, our initiative to try to push Bitcoin Alive and Bitcoin to newer circles. So yeah, we're really excited about that. We haven't fully announced it. Do we want to do like a cheeky little announcement here, or before we properly announce something?
No, hold it. No, fuck yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for this, but we are planning to announce it hopefully tomorrow. So anyone paying attention,
this won't be out for until towards the end of next week. So I think you'll be okay.
Okay, cool. So for anyone that's been paying attention, Bitcoin Alive, and to kind of tack on to the idea of Bitcoin is for everyone, which has been our mantra from day dot. For anyone paying attention to the date of Bitcoin Alive, it coincidentally / intentionally falls on International Women's Day. When we were looking at when we wanted to put this together, obviously last year we did March 23rd, I think it was. So we took a look at the calendar and we said, what's available at the venue, what doesn't clash with any other obvious things that we shouldn't clash with. And then we landed on March 8th. And then coincidentally, we looked at it and we said, oh, that's also International Women's Day. That's kind of interesting. Something that we've always wanted to do. And, half our team being females, we get this feedback directly from within our own circles, is that, hey, Bitcoin Alive's great and it's open to everyone, and we try our best to make it, accessible to all. I mean, even look at our branding. Our branding is very neutral in the sense it's not dark and male orientated. Lots of bright colors, and it's very fun. And we try to make it so it doesn't feel overwhelming and scary for the female gender, who perhaps, as we know, historically are not as enticed by Bitcoin. It's a very male dominated industry. I think that'll change over time organically.
Slowly, then suddenly.
Exactly. And Bitcoin is for everyone, including women, funnily enough. So one of the big pushes and one of the initiatives we're doing for this year is we're doing a special Bitcoin women in Bitcoin event. It's been done at a number of different conferences around the world, so it's not groundbreaking or we haven't reinvented the wheel or anything. It's just something that we've said, hey, we want to do this. We're putting on a women in Bitcoin breakfast the morning of Bitcoin Alive. And so it'll be a special hour and a half session before the main doors open for the proper conference. We will be hosting, our own Women in Bitcoin breakfast, specifically targeted content to women, very welcoming space. And, we hear it from our teams like, hey, I'm not so keen on the whole hash rate, Bitcoin mining and, all that sort of stuff. Like that doesn't really speak to me as a female. What I want to hear is, things more about personal stories and psychology and other things, right? So, here's our, again, I am a little bit unknown to this. I am of the other side of the coin. But, something that we're really keen to do and something that we're really stoked to be able to put on. You got to start somewhere. I don't know what this is going to be received like, whether we have 5 females in the room or we have 50. I'm not really sure, but you got to start somewhere. And it was the same risk we took when we started Bitcoin Alive. We didn't know how many people would turn up. Like we know 40 or 50 people come to the local meetups every month, but does that mean they're free? Does that mean people are willing to pay to come to this thing? Like they got to see some value in it. So we're putting on this event. You've heard it here first. If you haven't heard it from our own channels before this goes live. But yeah, we'd love to see like as many women as possible come to this event. We want it to be welcoming and opening to them. And we'd love to hear feedback on what they think would be useful for future events as well. We're kind of, going with the flow here. There's templates from what others have done, and we're doing our best to follow what we think makes sense. But yeah, really excited about that. I think it should be really cool.
I think that's absolutely awesome, and thanks so much for sharing it. What I'll do, Chris, for the community, if you're in Australia especially, or you're close, nowhere's fucking close to Australia. Not even New Zealand is really that close to Australia, man.
Closer than Perth.
yeah. Like some states, like feel like a whole country away. But if you're in Australia, you're close to, or you want to just come here, it's a really nice time of year. Sydney, go to Sydney. Make sure you get up to the Great Barrier Reef in Cairns. Go out diving. Go see the rainforest and stuff. Ullaru's a real cool place. This big giant rock in the middle of Australia. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to climb it anymore, but there's some real cool places to explore if you're from overseas. If you're already here, come join us. It's such an amazing event. Really good people, like so many personalities that you see on X, on podcasts, which they've always been the draw card for me to come to the conferences, Chris. But it's when you go there, it's just the plebs. Like it's just the Bitcoiners that have been there that are anonymous online, and you're talking to them. You're like, wow, man, you're like so fascinating. This one conversation's changed my life, or it's led me off and it's planted a seed that's grown into something like amazing now. Like that's been my experience from Bitcoin Alive last year. Some the relationships, the friendships, and some things that have come out of that, life changing. So if you like me or not like me, being weird and finding it hard to interact with normies because they think you're weird and they don't want to hear about Bitcoin anymore, go to the conference, go to the meetups like Chris is saying. But I'll link all your links below, including your socials, the website as well. And I just urge everyone, if you're looking for something to do on March 8th, Bitcoin Alive Sydney Roundhouse. It's absolutely epic, and looking forward to it. But I'll hand it over to you, Chris. If you want to give a final message, it can be on any topic, but just a little key takeaway for the Bitcoiners or the new people to Bitcoin that may be watching as well.
Yeah, I think what you just said there was really true. Like, we are social creatures, as you know, there's a spectrum of introvert versus extrovert, and some people don't like to leave their houses too often and socialize with people. But I think what makes Bitcoin Alive really special is it's very intimate. So, you know, everyone sees conferences from around the world and there's 20,000 people and there's huge crowds and you don't get to mingle with as many people as you'd like, and it's full on and it's just intense. You know, we're not like that. We could be like that, but that would be going against our principles. We prefer to make sure that our quality is more important than our quantity. So that'll happen organically. As Bitcoin becomes more popular, there will end up being thousands at our conferences, I imagine, in the future, if we can keep this thing going. But in the meantime, and up until then, we don't want to sacrifice the quality of the conference in terms of the experience. Like, you can mingle with the speakers, like, and have a beer with them at the event. It becomes easier if you've got a VIP ticket because it gives you access to the VIP area where the speakers do tend to hang out a lot more, but they wander around the entire event. It's not, I've been to a lot of other events where it's cordoned off. They all walk backstage. You don't see them. There's no interactions. Like, you get to chat with James Check. You won't miss him because he's the tallest guy in Bitcoin.
In Australia.
In Australia. But, you know, Peter Dunworth, Michael Dunworth. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've also announced Knut Svanholm's coming back as well for this year. So he came to Bitcoin Alive in 2023. We're bringing him back again for 2025. He was an absolute hit 2 years ago at Bitcoin Alive, and he told me that was his favorite ever conference, and he goes to like every conference. Yeah, I took that as a huge compliment because that was our first year. Like, we didn't know what we were really doing or what we were getting ourselves into, and he had that much of a good time that he's like, I'm coming back. He wants to come back every year. He wanted to come back last year as well. Like, let's make it this year. So we've made it this year, and he's coming back, and you'll get to hang out with him. Like, this is a world-renowned Bitcoin author. You'll be able to pick up his book, get an autograph, have a chat, share a beer, have a laugh, play some music. I know he loves music. 2 years ago, he did some impromptu acoustic sessions with Daz on the couch in the beer garden. So, like, these are all the sort of things that you get to do. I know a lot of people scoff at, like, oh, am I going to get the value? And, you know, I've heard all these speakers before on podcasts. Like, that's one side of the event. The other side of the event is the social experience that you get to have.
People.
It's the people. It's the connections you form. Like, that's one of our goals as well. It's just to bring everyone together. Because and this has already been proven true, but our hypothesis was, if we just put all of the Bitcoiners in the country in one room together, which has never been done before, magic will happen. Businesses will form, connections will establish, relationships will connect. Like, everything's going to happen from there. And we've seen it. Like, and this is what we want to do. And part of that is having the people come to be their little node within that larger ecosystem of Bitcoin in Australia. So I would urge you to come along. If the price is a problem, or if something's not right, come chat to me, reach out to me on Twitter, send me a DM, email us. Like, ultimately, we want to see you there more than not there, because we know you'll benefit from it.
Yeah. Yeah, I back up everything you're saying. I strongly urge everyone, if you're free, March 8th, do it. But Chris, and again, I've linked everything below, but Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's I look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, man. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me on the pod again. It's always a pleasure to have a chat with you, man.